All right. So before I begin, I want to go over a couple things in regards to our course. So if this week there were a few things that seemed kind of wonky, discussions didn't get posted by Wednesday, maybe you did your discussion, your posts all on the same, or your discussion post and your response all on the same day, like Friday. I am giving some leeway with that because I know that every course is different, and I can expect that, this is week one, and so we're, all kind of learning together. Sorry, let me fix my headphones real quick here because the sound's not coming out right. All right. Another thing I wanted to share in regards to this week's test, it should come up and it's randomized. So there's like 50 questions in the test bank. You're only going to get 10, and then it will randomly select 10 for you, and you'll answer those 10. Of those 50, so there was 50 from last week, 50 from this week, you only got 10 of each. And then next week, when we do our big exam, you'll get 50. It'll be like 25 from chapter 1, 25 from chapter 2. And I'm really trying to keep some validity with this text. So you'll notice that I'm using the PowerPoints from the text. I'm using many questions that are derived directly from the text and not many from outside sources or that kind of thing. So I really want you to focus on the text, and my hope is that that'll create some consistency in terms of what we're learning and how to follow the course. So if you have any questions regarding that, please feel free to let me know, okay? All right, 1 second, let me make sure nobody's waiting here. How do I make this big real quick? All right, cool. So I think it's just going to be you and I. That's totally cool. If you have any questions, feel free to chime in because it's just you and I, so I don't worry too much about feedback. And like I said, these are totally optional. I imagine that at some point this semester, I'm going to be talking to nobody, and that's fine too. I'm just going to pretend like everybody's here, and we're just going to keep going. Today, it's just you and I. We're going to make this happen. So this week we are talking about socialization, and I'm going to go through the PowerPoints, but again, I'm not going to read all of them to you because I know that you have a lot of access to this on Canvas, but I am going to talk a little bit about them as we go. And so I tried to, when I make my notes to do these little lectures, I am hoping that they'll kind of follow the same slide deck, but it also may not. So if I jump around a little bit, that's why. I promise that the content I'm sharing with you is still related, but it just may not go in the same exact order. So socialization is how we give rules and provide structure to help people become productive members of society. So the idea is that we can develop a self-concept, an idea of who a person is, to help people self-regulate, to help them achieve and become, again, productive members of society, and to teach appropriate goals. So let's dive into a couple of these. Society is going to differ by culture and their views of childhood. So based on where you live, what kind of culture you're involved of, embedded in, ideas of children and childhood differ. So a society, let's say a culture in the, oh gosh, I want to get like somebody who grew up in Russia, they may have a totally different view of what children should do and what their expectations are. Whereas in America, or even, I don't know, like Japan, there may be different ideas of what is accepted for children. So as children grow up, we create these little boxes that we want children to fit into, right? And we tell our children, this is what's expected of you here, and this is how we behave in society. We do that in a number of ways. Sometimes it's direct, like I tell my children when we are at the store that we wait in line, that you're going to stand right next to me while we wait in line because that's a norm that we have here. I don't want them running to the front and interrupting the cashier because they want to do whatever, who knows what they want to do, right? So I'm setting this norm. It's very direct. I'm telling you this is exactly what you need to do. Other times it's more indirect. Like we show children that this is what's expected of us. I'm showing my children that standing in line is expected of us when I'm standing in line, when I'm following those rules, right? And so through these things, we are creating this box that children kind of understand, or this schema that in society, this is how I'm supposed to behave. We also want to give children lots and lots of experiences. So the more experiences they have, especially in regards to being out in public or being in society, the more ideas that they'll have of how to behave in society. So I'll give you one example. I live in a very rural area. We have a grocery store and a couple things in town. It's not like I don't live in the middle of nowhere. But my children they stay home a lot, right? I take them to childcare, but I do all my grocery shopping. Like normally I pick up groceries. So like I don't even really go to the grocery store very often. We don't go to like Target. We don't have one of those. Um, we've never been to the mall, these kinds of things. But this summer I went back home to Modesto and I was visiting my family and we took them to the mall to do something. And my children were walking through the mall and somebody had left a piece of pizza by the See's candy counter. And my daughter like ran over and picked it up and tried to start eating it. And so I had to tell her like, no, this is not what we do. This is not safe. You know, you can't eat food from the floor. But like at home, honestly, she probably does this all the time. I've got 3 kids. Pizza probably drops. Her sister comes along, she picks it up. She's like, cool, I'm gonna eat some pizza. And it's not something like not the hill I'm gonna die on. I see it every once in a while. I'm like, oh god, I need to pick up some pizza, but I'm over here folding laundry. I'm gonna get to that soon. And next time I turn around, it's like gone, right? Um, and so these ideas that like this is a norm that we've set, and then I take them out into public and we have these different ideas of norms. So the more experience that children can get, the more they're going to know what those norms are. So the more my children get out to the mall, they will know what's expected of them there. They haven't been since, and the next time they go, I hope they don't eat pizza off the floor, but they might because they don't have those experiences, right? That's one way that we kind of help socialize people and we give them these norms and expectations. The more they go to the store, the more they're going to be comfortable. I also have never taken my children to a restaurant because I have so many young children that seems really scary to me. And so I know that someday I'm going to take them and they're going to be older and I'm going to think like, what have I done? These kids have no idea how to behave. Well, I have like this 5-minute rule, like they have to sit down and eat with us for 5 minutes, but um otherwise they're probably going to sit at the restaurant for 5 minutes and then just go crazy. And so I haven't set that norm. They've never experienced that, so that'll be something like, right, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But again, the more experiences they have, the better. My sister-in-law takes her daughter out to eat all the time. She's the same age as my twins, and like great, she knows that when you go to the restaurant you sit, sometimes they let you color, you wait for your food, you're just going to sit there and wait. And she's like, great. And I think like, man, your daughter is so patient. And she's explained, like, well, this is something we've worked on for a really, really long time. Like, not something my children have experiences with. So, right. So these different experiences are going to help shape what children think are appropriate and not. All right. So this week, I want you guys to look at Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. This is something that I think is really, really valuable. I love this theory of psychosocial development. And I really like that he kind of breaks it up into these developmental stages and what children are working on. So one of the things I love are these values, but then also these outcomes. And they don't talk too much about these outcomes in your text. But for example, the first one is trust versus mistrust. And that's something that happens in infancy. Out of trust versus mistrust, if it is resolved positively. So a child develops trust for their caregiver. They develop the will or they develop hope, right? As like a virtue. That's what I'm trying to say. So sometimes, or most of the time, my child, my infant is crying and I meet their needs. I hear, let's see, Cody is my youngest. When she was crying as an infant, I would go and comfort her. I would make sure she was safe and secure. If she was hungry, I would give her a bottle. If she was wet, I would change her diaper. So she developed this trust for me that if I cry, my needs will be met. And I know that a caregiver is going to come and I can trust that the world is going to provide for me. Some children don't have that. Some children are in houses where they cry and an adult does not come to meet their needs. They are, reaching out and it's not, their needs are not getting met. And this develops a sense of mistrust. Every once in a while, their needs will get met, right? And so they have this little bit of trust where they're like, okay, so my needs finally got met. I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried, and somebody finally came and gave me a bottle. Okay, but it takes a really long time, right? Similarly, sometimes Cody cries and I'm busy, right? Like I've got twins, you have to wait for a minute and then I'll get your bottle or whatever you need. And so there's these little bits of mistrust. And for trust to be resolved positively, and a caregiver will provide most of the time, right? So most of the time I'm going to be there. I'm going to change your diaper. I'm going to be there to comfort you. I'm going to be there to give you food or whatever you need. But sometimes I can't, right? Like I'm busy with my toddlers and it's just going to take me a minute to get there. She's in her crib and she's crying and it's going to be a minute. Or I'm driving to the doctor's office and I can hear her crying in the back seat and she's probably hungry. I know she's hungry because I know that this is the time she typically eats, but I can't do anything about it because I'm driving, right? And it wouldn't be safe and I can't be late to this doctor, right? And so there's these little bits of like mistrust thrown in where she's just like, man, I was supposed to trust you, mom, and you didn't show up. And now I'm hungry and I'm upset. And these are okay because in society, we kind of want there to be like a little bit of mistrust. If something feels dangerous or kind of shady, like I want to have a little bit of mistrust. We want everybody to have a little bit of mistrust so they don't just go out into the world like, everybody, this is all my business. Or, you know what I mean? Like, you want to be guarded in some situations. And so developing that little sense of mistrust is kind of one way to do that. So, and that kind of goes through all of Erikson's developmental stages. So, for example, autonomy versus shame and doubt. We want children to become autonomous. We want them to be able to do things by themselves. But every once in a while, we want them to have that like shame and doubt because when my child is 10, I don't want them to think like, I could totally jump off the roof and land on a handstand, right? Like, no, I want you to have a little bit of doubt in what you can do so that you can reevaluate a situation and say, hey, this might not be something that I can do, right? So that goes through all of them. We ideally want everything to be resolved positively. This will be all these first values here, but there's going to be a little bit of these secondary ones, and that's okay, and that's healthy. Okay. So, but take some time to look in Erikson's theory. I think it's really important. It goes over it in your book. If you would like to research more on it, I recommend it for sure. All right. So, in regards to socialization, we also have to self-regulate. So, as an adult, I can self-regulate pretty well. Some adults can self-regulate better than others. You probably have experience with adults that can't self-regulate quite as well. Same goes for children. So children aren't born able to self-regulate, right? When Cody was a baby and she's crying, I can't tell her from the back, like, I'm going to the doctor and you have to be in the car seat for another 45 minutes till we get there. And she says, oh, okay, I can recognize this. I'm going to self-regulate. I have these skills. So she does it. And that's okay. We develop these things as children grow and develop. So experiences in the world, strategies, different situations will play into how we can self-regulate. Of course, self-regulation gets better the longer or the more we develop. My toddlers are really learning how to self-regulate, and Cody hasn't quite figured it out. My toddlers are 2.5, Cody's a year. So they are figuring out how to self-regulate, but they're still not experts in that. There's a lot of times where we have like complete meltdowns. I always say too, they go to childcare from like 8 in the morning until like 3:30 or so. It's kind of most of my workday anyway. And by the time they get home, about 4:45 or 5 o'clock, they're done. Like they can't self-regulate anymore. It's taken so much of what they're able to do that by like 4:30 they're just done. And they've worked so hard all day to try to control their behavior, control their emotions, and it's okay. Like it's okay with me when you're really, really upset because your red cup doesn't exist, right? Like or Ember was telling me the other day she really wanted this red sippy cup. We don't have one of those. And she was so mad. So maybe they had one at school, but she like totally lost it. And that's okay with me. I hugged her and I told her, I know you're really, really sad right now. You wish you had that. And so I'm modeling for her how to self-regulate, that she could take a deep breath. I actually told her that at the same time to like put your hand on your chest and I want you to breathe in. Feel your feel your body get big and then feel your body get small. Right. And so I can give her these strategies, but she is not going to be able to do that all the time. And I certainly wouldn't expect my 2.5-year-old to put her hand on her chest and take a deep breath and say, okay, I understand that this thing doesn't exist right now. So all of these things take time. Certainly when we're not able to self-regulate, we become more impulsive and our behavior sometimes is not appropriate. That's often what's happening with children. And so when we self-regulate, we're really kind of pulling from this front part of our brain, and that's the first place to shut down when we become stressed, when we become overwhelmed, when we're just kind of done. We've all been there, right? And so children, we can just expect that they're going to get there quicker than us, and to they're not able to come back as quickly either. So remember that when you're working with children. The older they are, the better they can self-regulate. But again, we're not always going to be able to. We also put a lot of expectations on children. I know from teaching elementary school that my expectations for an 8-year-old was a lot. Like you had to come in, you had to be on at 8:30, ready to go. We're gonna read a story, and I wanted to see those magical reading fingers following pages. And at 2:30, right before we went home, we were still doing things, right? So that whole time, my class was on. They were doing the best they could. And sometimes they weren't able to. And so like I can't self-regulate, right? And so they're telling me, I can't self-regulate. This is a lot. I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm kind of done with this. And so sometimes we see these behaviors and it's really just a response to their environment. So take that into consideration too. Let's see, I want to talk about community influences. This might be kind of the same place. So this could be it. So regarding different kinds of communities or cultures that we live in, there are different ideas of what's appropriate. So one thing, for example, would be this idea of collectivism versus individualism. And when we look at cultures like Middle Eastern cultures, Mexican cultures, Japanese cultures, we see this collectivist approach where the family unit is really a unit and everybody works together to support one another. Opposingly, we also see a lot of times in America where we have this individualistic approach or this individualism. And there we see like the family is a unit, but their idea is to like help each person kind of become their own individual person. And the idea isn't to work together. So I see that a lot in like I have friends who are adults and they support their family back home in whatever ways. Like they maybe send money home and are supporting their family. And they're in this very much collectivist family structure. Whereas an individualistic family, I also have families or friends that would never support their family back home, right? Where they're Like, well, nope, I went and earned my own paycheck. I'm not here to help you. Like, you're on your own. So those are kind of the two differences, if you will. Excuse me. We also see this idea of, like, in some cultures, we have more of a submissive attitude towards authority, especially that might be based on gender or hierarchy in the family too. And so, and then in others, this idea that, like, no, we want to empower people to speak out or whatever. And I'm not saying any one of those is right or wrong. I think that there's a place for each of those things. But knowing that in the cultures, these are different ways to approach things is really important, especially as a teacher. So if I am a teacher, I'm a professional working with children, and there's a family who is more submissive towards authority, or especially a mother, like I'm working with a mother who feels more submissive towards authority, and oftentimes professionals working in education will feel like that professional working in education is the authority figure, like they know everything about their child. And so it's really important to understand these differences, because if I come from a culture where growing up I was always told, no, you speak out against authority, you can you have the right to do all these things, but then I'm working with a family who's more submissive, I might expect that family to be able to speak out if they think I'm wrong, but they may feel like they're not able to, or that's not their cultural norm. So they're just going to sit back quietly and maybe smile and nod. And I'm thinking, like, cool, we're on the same page, when in reality, they're not. Okay, um, so think about those things too. Understanding your own culture and the culture that families come from, or that your children come from, is really, really important to ensuring that we're not missing each other, right? So we're not doing this dance of, like, they think one thing about the teacher and you think one thing about the family, and we're just constantly not seeing eye to eye. If you can understand that there's differences and then acknowledge them, like, that's really, really powerful. If I come to you and say, hey, I know that somebody is working to provide services for your child, and you might feel like they're an authority figure, but I want to help you kind of speak out if you feel willing to, or these kinds of things, or I want to be able to help see where you're coming from as far as your views of what we can do to help support your child. I think that's really, really powerful. So think about those things too when you're working with families. Let's talk a little bit about egocentrism. I think this is really, really important. So egocentrism, if you don't know what it is yet, you'll probably talk about it 101, 103, probably every class that you take. It is the ability to look at the world from another person's point of view. So egocentrism is something that we're born with. We are born and we're very egocentric. We think that the whole world revolves around us. And certainly for an infant, it kind of does, right? Like the infant lies there, they cry, somebody just appears and takes care of them. And then this person might disappear for a while, they come back and they're right. So the whole world just kind of happens around them. And as they get older, children start to develop this view that actually there's different perspectives to take. I can see this sense of children, or of my own children, becoming less egocentric as my toddlers are now 2.5. I can see that they can understand when other people are sad, even when they're not sad, right? But my 1-year-old daughter, Cody, she doesn't get that yet. So if the toy gets taken away from her, so just earlier today, she came and she took a toy away from Cindy, and Cindy went and took it back. Cindy had every right to take it back, right? Like she had this, Cody took it, she was like, no, I'm taking this back. Cody just lost it. And she's like so sad. She has no idea that her taking that toy from Cindy had anything to do with Cindy, right? Like it was all just about Cody, because she's still really egocentric. She's in this place. So it's not like her, certainly she shouldn't take things from her sister, but she has no idea that that affects her sister in any way whatsoever. Cindy, on the other hand, notices that when she takes something away from Cody, it makes her sad. So she's learned to bring her something, right? And treat her. She's like, I want this toy. Here, Cody, check this thing out. And then they'll trade. So she's developing this sense of becoming less egocentric. And certainly she doesn't get that all, she's not perfect at this. Again, everything gets better as we develop. But children are born this way. And so that's also another thing that's important to understand. If I'm working with really young children and I have a 1-year-old who is taking toys away from another child, it's not appropriate of me to expect that 1-year-old knows that upsets that other child. Like, they have no idea. I can share with them, oh no, look, I can see her face. It is sad. She's crying. Look, I can hear her, all these things, but she's, it's going to take time to develop. So, and then I want to talk a little bit about parenting styles. Where's that? Again, sorry for jumping around. So parenting styles, I think, are important too, because as a parent, I think they're important, but I also think they're really important when you're working with children, because you can really translate these parenting styles into like teaching styles or into caregiving styles. So the 4 parenting styles are authoritarian, permissive, authoritative, and neglectful. Authoritarian, let's start there, has really high expectations and really low affection or kindness. So an authoritarian parent is a parent who says, you do this because I said so. This is the end all and be all. This is, it's my way or the highway. And I think a lot of families were probably like that. I don't know. I felt like when I was growing up, a lot of families were like that. Maybe that was just the culture I was in. But really high expectations. So my child is going to do A, B, and C, and they are going to do it perfectly. And I don't care how they feel, because this is the way that it needs to be done. Really low affection, right? Or low kindness. A permissive parent has really high kindness and affection, but really low expectations. This is a parent who will kind of let their child do anything and everything. They don't have expectations for maybe rules in the house or chores as they get older, school, whatever. But they're all about like connection with the child. They're making sure they're connected to the child. They feel heard. They're really responsive to their child's feelings and what's going on with that. But again, they don't have many expectations. And then an authoritative parent or caregiver is somebody who has really high expectations, but also has really high kindness. And so there's this balance. So that might be a parent or a caregiver who says, I expect you to clean up the blocks that you just dumped. And the child is crying and saying, I don't want to. And the parent or caregiver can say, I understand you don't want to. It feels really hard right now, but I expect you to, right? Like, I will sit here with you and do it, or I'll sit here right next to you while you do it. And I know this is really hard. So there's kind of this difference. Whereas the permissive parent might say, like, I know that was really hard. I'll clean up the blocks for you. And the authoritarian parent might say, clean up the blocks and I don't care. And I'm going to walk away and let me know when you're done, right? Or they shut the door and they're like, you can come out of your room when those blocks are cleaned. So there's kind of these like 3. And then neglectful would have no expectations and no affection. So I'm not connecting with the child. I don't have expectations with the child. It's really just disengaged, right? Okay. Let's see. I want to end this before too long here. Let's talk about socializing. Oh, there's nothing in here. Okay. So here we go. There is something. Okay. So let's talk about operant methods of socializing children. This is sometimes referred to as applied behavioral analysis, or it's really similar to applied behavioral analysis. I will tell you that when I was going through the program, there were very heated and mixed emotions about ABA, applied behavioral analysis. Some people were like, yes, this is the way to do everything. I love it. I am ABA all the way. And other people were like, no, don't ever use it. I hate it. And so I still know some professionals that are like that. I myself feel like there's probably a middle ground, but I do want to kind of let you know that because I think moving forward, it's nice. I was kind of skewed the first time the first time I learned about it, and they said, I really don't like this method. And so as a student, I thought, well, I don't like it either. Like this professional that I'm talking to told me they didn't like it. So I totally respected that person and I'm going to believe that also. Um, after working in the field, I don't know, I'm kind of in the middle. Like I think this works sometimes, I think it doesn't other times. So you kind of have to know the individual. But anytime something like that comes up, just I don't know, I was the student that was like really influenced by professionals that I felt were really respectable and they were. But then I felt like I'm just gonna believe what they believe. And so don't make that mistake because I did. Anyway, so applied behavioral analysis or operant methods is where you have a behavior and it's really based on changing behavior. So you can reinforce the behavior. You can reinforce the behavior positively or negatively. A child who is, let me see, I should have written an example down. I'm kind of escaping it right now. A child who does something well, I might reward by saying, wow, I love that you're doing this. So let me think if I have an example. My girls were cleaning up the other day. Well, one of them, one of the three cleaned up. And I told them, oh, we need to clean up because it's dinner time. And so we have to go eat dinner. Two of them didn't care. They didn't want to eat dinner. So it didn't really matter if they cleaned up either. But one of them did. And so as she was cleaning up, I told her, wow, I love that you're picking up that baby doll and putting it in a toy box right now. Wow, that's really responsible. And the more that she hears me say this, the more I'm reinforcing this behavior that she is going to continue cleaning, right? She likes hearing that. Like, I love getting feedback like that. I love when even my husband says, like, wow, that garlic bread tasted really good tonight. I'm like, yes, I'm going to cook garlic bread so good next time. Like, I am pumped. He totally reinforced that we're going to have a lot more garlic bread now. And so it's the same for children. And when we give them positive feedback, they are more likely to continue to do that behavior. Sometimes, though, we can reinforce a behavior that we don't like. For example, let's say, have two children. One of them wants some attention. I'm not giving it to them. Maybe I'm involved with the other child. And so the child that I'm not paying attention to, that's what they want. They want the attention. And so what they're going to do, maybe they take a toy and they throw it on the ground, and then I stop talking to this child and I go back and I reinforce what they did by giving them attention, right? So see how that's kind of like I'm negatively reinforcing the behavior. I'm saying like, hey, you should not have picked up that toy. I need you to pick it up, or that wasn't safe, or you shouldn't have thrown down that toy. That wasn't safe, whatever. And I've reinforced that behavior that if you want attention, you can do something that is not a great behavior and you'll get attention. Extinction is when we ignore a behavior and eventually it gets removed. So the more I reinforce these positive behaviors and the more I ignore these negative behaviors, the less they will happen. So this child throws something on the floor. I continue doing what I'm doing with this other child and I ignore it. And maybe they want attention some other way. And eventually they come over and they say, hey, Mrs. Quinn. I say, oh, hey, what's going on, Lori? And then that will reinforce that, like, if you want my attention, you can just ask for it. Okay, so the more I reinforce positives, the more I ignore the negatives, extinction will happen. The negatives will just be removed. And then additionally, you can punish, which sometimes can be like through spanking children or removal of a privileges. So a child is not behaving and they don't get TV privileges, or I don't know, maybe they don't get to go to a party. A child runs out into the street and then they come back and the parent reinforces that they can't go out into the street by spanking them. Not something I recommend, not something I think you can do. This is the like part of operant conditioning that I think is really difficult to deal with as a developmentalist. And but the undesirable behavior becomes less pleasant, right? Does that make sense? So I don't get a good grade on my math test. My mom grounds me. I don't get a good grade on my math test. My mom grounds me. I don't get a good grade on my math test. My mom grounds me. Eventually, I'm going to say, hey, I should get better grades on my math test because this being grounded all the time is really undesirable, right? And so she's kind of reinforcing that I should get better. Another way of socializing people is through modeling. This is kind of my big thing that I do is, just kind of being the change that you wish to see. And so providing experiences and showing children what we expect. I model how to breathe when I am stressed. I tell my children, like, I am feeling really unhappy right now. And so right now I'm going to sit down and I want to be quiet, and I model these things, I say them out loud. And then eventually my children start picking up on them. So I hear my children say and do the same things that I'm doing. Sometimes that's positive, sometimes that's negative, right? And so, and we've all probably experienced that where you're like, see a child do something that their parent or caregiver or you have done, and you think like, ooh, this is not really what I wanted to model. But here they've kind of picked up on that. So, and that's really, really influential. We also see that sometimes children are guided by their peers, and especially as they become older, we are involved with our peers more often, and so the expectations that our peers have kind of shape who we are, what we do, and what's successful in that. So a peer might tell me like, no, you really should just not listen to your mom when you're grounded and, sneak out and go to this party. And so that, this like pressure to kind of do these things that will influence children too. And so that becomes a socializing factor in itself. One of the things that I ask you guys to look at, if one of the 2 discussion posts this week, is how are family and peers related, especially when we're looking at that Bronfenbrenner's ecological model. And then also, what role does family and peers have, and like how do they influence each other? So, for example, I have a friend who really monitors who her children's peers are so that she can make sure that her child has the best outcomes. Then I have another friend who's like, oh, she'll figure it out. I hope that I've given her the right skills. And, her peers are kind of who she's chosen, and hopefully she picks good ones, right? So those are 2 different outlooks on like how families interact with peers. But one of the things that I ask you in your discussion is, what was your experience like with that? And how did that help shape your socializing? So, all right. This week, I am going to get to your grading as soon as I can. I'm hoping to have it done by Wednesday afternoon for last week. And my hope is that it won't be too far behind typically. And typically I'll always have your grading done by Wednesday of the following week. So if stuff's due on Sunday, then by Wednesday I'll kind of get it all knocked out. Some days will be a little earlier, or some weeks will be a little earlier, some weeks will be a little later, kind of depending on what you're going or what I've got going on. But I will always do my best to give you feedback. Check your Canvas, and I'm going to stop sharing now. Check your Canvas because I will give you guys some feedback on Canvas for your work or your discussions and those kinds of things. And then next week, we're going to meet on Tuesday instead of Monday because Monday's a holiday and I don't have childcare. So putting my infant down on Monday is easy and reliable. Putting my, somebody just came to my house. Putting my toddlers down is not always as reliable. So I'm going to change to Tuesday because they'll be back in childcare. This week, so my school district started school on Wednesday. My children went to childcare on Wednesday and Thursday. They went to school on Thursday, so they went 2 days, and then school shut down because of COVID. So here we are living in this COVID world again. I have all 3 kids home. Their grandma's here right now helping with them so that I could do this. But next week I can only ask for so much before I am going to burn all those bridges and nobody's going to want to help me. So we'll meet on Tuesday next week, and hopefully we'll be able to stay in and my kids can keep going to childcare. But So as things change for you guys, and just keep communication open because I get that things change, right? Like my life has been turned upside down by having all three of my kids home right now and just kind of changing my priorities. So, but again, if you don't keep that communication open with me, I don't know how to help you and I don't know how to be there. So, um, if things change, let me know. So otherwise I don't think you're rude or, not talking to us. So, all right. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next Tuesday, same time.